Hello, I'm the artist known as Fake Zappa. I was born in Portland, Oregon in 1973 at Good Samaritan Hospital. Went to Metropolitan Learning Center, and I graduated with a ton of arts and music credit. And around that time, I was composing music and notating it and producing my own multi-track recording. And towards the end of high school, I even worked a little bit in professional theater. I went to Portland Community College in the professional music program. I even got on the radio a couple of times with my original music and some live music. I started bands, I did performance art projects, I did some mural stuff, some activism stuff around the time of the Gulf War. I was a regular at the X-Ray Cafe and some very iconic Portland stuff. Classic Portland weirdness. Anyways, by the time I was 20 years old, I had totally lost my mind. And I had no friends. I wasn't recognized in any community. And I was basically forgotten about. I did end up getting a little bit better in the 90s. And then I was in my 20s and actually made a living doing music-related stuff, mostly in education. But when I was up in Alaska, they weren't so concerned that I did not have a formal education. I have no academic background because of cognitive disorders and learning disabilities and stuff like that. So I wasn't accepted in the educational world, and I did a lot of work in the church world. Well, of course, that fell apart because I came out as gay. And then, of course, you go 15 years into the future. In 2009, I come back to my hometown in Portland, try to establish my career again, because I got a lot better and I learned a lot more and I had a lot better ideas. Started a band, I started making more recordings, I was playing for bands, and things got very surreal because when I felt like an outcast in the early 90s, and it was really because the folks that were successful were guys that were throwing parties. They didn't necessarily have money, they had power. They had some kind of privileges. It was usually their functioning level, their business functioning, and I never developed socially. So there was a lot of things that just didn't work in a community like Portland. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with folks that I grew up with, and I call it like urban, progressive, West Coast, educated culture. And I agree with the views and everything like that. It's just that we're a hyper polite people and we know how to talk, and there's definitely a social status thing going on, and you don't know it until you're one, when you're towards the bottom of it, and two, when you have a dream or a vocation or a calling that requires you to operate in a different level of this class system, this caste system, this social ranking. And a lot of it has to do with social media numbers and stuff like that. So not being the kind of popular guy, still, even after 10 more years of being in Portland and not having the social skills and the social status and not throwing parties and not having a lot of the privileges that a lot of other folks do. Some of them were talented, and basically being an outcast again. And like, how did this happen? I really did everything right. And even like 3 years ago, and I was like, okay, I'm following my dream, I'm pursuing it full time. I got funding, I got more education, and again, I ended up in places that I felt that were unsafe, places where I felt excluded. However, folks were very polite. Folks would say a lot of good things, and mostly it was just advice. And sometimes I would even get funding. And I was well connected, which I thought was very interesting as well. However, what I noticed is folks were more like, okay, Fake Zappa, I hear your sad story. Boy, that's really sad. A lot of people go through that. Well, there's the door. Go through it. And hey, I know this person. Call this person and do that. Not once has anybody in the United States actually opened a door and took me through and said, hey, this guy needs accommodations. He needs to be in a safe place. And what I've noticed is that over the last couple of years, that the folks that I do business with, when it comes to venues, when it comes to hiring people, is that I'm very open about mental disabilities. I've been living on Social Security and support for over 10 years. And I just assumed that in a culture that we seem to try to identify ourselves as helping underprivileged people, and of course minorities and sexual minorities and stuff like that. So being gay wasn't the issue like it was in the church people. I mean, it's obviously, oh, well, that's bigotry. But the weird thing was, here it is, my disability is something that, well, I didn't ask for. I was born with it, and it's something that's not changing no matter how well I take care of myself and all the self-care and all the help I try to get. It's that I experience the same things that people would call bigotry when it comes to anti-gay stuff. And so I do find it really weird that here in a community like Portland that we label ourselves certain ways. And when it comes down to it, there are certain people that really are left out. And I didn't feel included when it came to the fact that I had a registered business. The bank acknowledged me as a businessman, but as far as that, I'd give business cards out and people would say very nice things. Oh, we'll follow up, we'll do this. So I decided to just really like, hey, what if I just keep calling and writing people over and over and over again? And I found out they had no interest in actually doing anything to help a disadvantaged person to be successful in any productive way at all. I got useless advice. I mean, really, really ridiculous, useless advice. It doesn't work for anybody at my functioning level and for unconventional work like I do. So it was like I was this invisible guy, like, hey, this is what I have to offer. This is what I have to give and contribute. And not only that, I've got a history in this town. And it was weird. I went to a screening one time of some footage from the X-Ray Cafe a couple years ago, and there's me. And I'm thinking, you know, it's so weird that I was just this total forgotten person, like all this stuff that I accomplished, all this stuff that I survived. I never went to jail because of my illness. I survived the AIDS crisis. I've been hospitalized a bunch of time, and I've never done any permanent damage because of suicide attempts and a lot of things that people like me usually go through, which is typically self-harm and substance abuse. So the way I see it, I'm a success story. It's just that the kind of success stories that people are accustomed to is folks that have power, that get a lot of attention, that have a lot of influence because of their contribution, whether their work is shitty or not. It's just, oh, well, this person has a lot of attention, therefore their work must have value. And I found that, especially after my home studio burnt down, I was like, wow, my work has no value to anybody but me. And I really had to put my own price tag on it and say, I worked hard, I suffered for this, I have experience, I have something to offer the world of arts and entertainment and activism and mental health, and just my story in itself has value to it. And I found that the folks that want to hear certain people, especially like with gay publications, when it comes to conversion therapy, I don't have the Hollywood type ex-gay conversion therapy story like a lot of these Hollywood stories are, like Boy Erased and stuff like that. So when publications are interested in my story and they find out that I'm on disability, I am not recognized with any institution, I did not get resources, and the gay community pretty much turned their back on me when it came to me being hurt and traumatized and just generally fucked up because of what this anti-gay therapy from the Bible world had done to me. And there are people that get support, there are people that get connected, and there are people that are treated as outcasts. And we don't know the people that are treated as outcasts because most of the time we don't speak out. And most of the time when we try to resolve these things, typically the folks that are powerless, that don't have a voice, they get hurt. Their reputations get destroyed. And so I decided, well, what if I did something, you know, as far as, yeah, putting stuff out on the web is one thing, though, but I thought maybe I'll just do some sidewalk chalk and maybe just tell a little bit of my story and put some more stuff out on the web about it. There's some people that can relate to being an outcast in certain degrees, especially when it comes to folks that live with trauma and folks that live with basically an undeveloped social thing, you know. and, and it's really weird how Portland has turned into this place where we value power and privilege and popularity and all those P's, things that I might not necessarily have, even if I do have the funding, even if I do have the connections. I am excluded and I am not included when it comes to the world of arts, no matter what I contribute and what I've survived and even my story. So this is part of what I'm trying to say with this stuff about me leaving Portland for maybe the last time, hopefully, and at least hopefully I'm getting through to a few people about why I'm leaving town and why it is important for my career and my mental health to leave an area that has been hostile towards me when it comes to my illness, that has put me in unsafe environments as a creative person, and who has undermined my efforts when I started my band and when I do my projects and things like that. The kind of cutthroat sort of competition that has been going on here over the last, you know, more in later times in Portland history has really gotten me to think about what has happened to this town and why there's a lot of people that I like and respect that are leaving this area. And why are we attracting the Portlandia fans type folks? And what type of power-hungry type energy are they bringing to the arts and to our community? And is the product suffering? Are they creating really shitty conventional stuff? And so I hope that this is helping me to realize maybe what went wrong. And if this doesn't even get seen, this is healing for me to you know, to not like leave and then disappear in some mental institutions like I did when I was 20 years old. I want to leave and follow my dream. And that's what I'm doing, whether the community of Portland or Oregon or even the whole Pacific Northwest does anything legitimate to really back my work or not. I'm going to do it and I'm going to follow my dream. And it's not easy doing it alone. It's just been really weird, the kind of silence that I've got when it comes to even hiring people, hiring companies. And the businesses and the individuals who are successful, who are recognized, who are reputable, refuse to work with me. And those that are like the Craigslist type people that are disreputable, those are the folks that I'm stuck with. They take my money and they go. And that's another part of my story as well. Another thing too is that, well, what would happen? I mean, things were getting really bad. I thought, well, maybe if I just tell people up front, I'm not asking for a lot of accommodations, but you know, folks need a wheelchair ramp if they're in a wheelchair. This is basically how to help me. I need folks to really communicate clearly, take a little more time. And if there's loud noises and things, that I might wear earplugs, I might do things to help me to not have panic attacks. Well, instead of making me somebody as like, well, they're not going to accommodate me, it would be okay if they just said, no, we're not willing to do that. But instead, I was seen as vulnerable. So it was like, oh, we can cheat this guy and nobody will listen to him. And it is unbelievable how many folks that I've done business with, the thousands of dollars that I've lost, and even tried to take action against some companies. And these are mostly locally owned and run companies who have cheated me. And they have a reputable background with most people who are career people, family people, and recognized people. They treat them with respect. And a lot of folks don't want to hear my story because I'm like, really, this company did this to me? Really? How did, no, it's just because of who I am. It is really strange being at a low social status in a community that doesn't recognize that there is a social status, because people don't know their power. They don't know their privilege, because that's all they're seeing is they're seeing, you know, our current American government, how oppressive it is, and these big corporations and stuff. And they don't see how they're treating underprivileged people the same as they're being treated, except the fact that when somebody is underprivileged, and yeah, I'm more privileged than a lot of homeless people, is who's going to hear us? Who's going to defend people like me? Folks think I can defend myself, and the truth is, I'm scared. I'm scared when there's a conflict in the Portland area because of my history of not being heard, not even considered that there could be another side of the story. Is that when somebody loses their mind and they're scared, higher functioning people, no matter how many times you tell them, this is my disability, this is what I need to be alone, or I need to do this and that in order to recover, I'm having a panic attack, they get scared, and when they're scared, they'll use their power, they'll use their influence in order to protect themselves. And here's the thing about West Coast urban progressive culture, is that we don't bully people outwardly as much as a lot of other folks do. We pride ourselves in being so polite. It's just what we do is we silence people. We use our power to undermine their power. We destroy their reputations. And I call it passive-aggressive bullying. And I call myself a victim of this. And I have story after story of folks who were paid, who said they were going to do something productive or legitimate, and poof, they're gone. Or when I try to, resolve a situation or something like that, is that in really polite ways, I'm just ignored and ignored and ignored. So maybe just writing some sidewalk chalk or something down there that's not vandalism, it's something that the rain will wash away. At least it's one way of saying, hey, maybe this is another way that I could be visible when I've been invisible for most of my life. And so I'm also wanting to raise awareness about mental health issues. And aside from the fact that the Willamette Valley and a lot of the Pacific Northwest has turned into a place that is making the powerful more powerful and a disappearing middle class, and those that are powerless to have less power. And we don't see it unless we're at the bottom looking up. It's very hard to acknowledge it when somebody has privileges that they don't acknowledge. And the other thing is that when you have this abuse of power going on and this addiction to power going on in a community, it will lead to abuse, more trauma, which will lead to more trauma. We'll have social ills, and of course violent crime, and a lot of these things in Portland are symptoms of what I believe is a lot of this excluding folks from really what they need. And in addition to that, the worst thing is what's happening to mental health. So one thing I like to tell people is if somebody's in a mental health crisis or just needs mental health care, you can't tell them anymore, go get help. You have to follow through with them to make sure they get the help. And you'd be surprised at how impossible or how difficult it is to actually get legitimate care that's affordable, that's available, that actually works. And even getting your foot in the door is really hard. And it's so weird that after 10 years, it's like, okay, can I actually get somebody to prescribe me psych meds? No. And it is bizarre. So you ask people who are mentally disabled, who are on Medicare like me especially, find out what the discrimination is, not only about them getting the health care that they need, but the other big thing is vocational support. And I refuse to go back to an entry-level job that is going to traumatize me and get me back on disability because of my skilled background and what I have to contribute. And it's amazing that when you try to get a career like this that requires people giving you attention, there's a fight, and it scares people. What if people listen to this crazy guy and actually heard my story and actually did something about it? And I think that's what people are scared of. And there's nothing to be afraid of. I have no background of violence. It's just a perceived threat. And a perceived threat is crazy. So, it's weird being crazy and having my whole community around me do things that are crazy. And it makes me think, hey, I'm supposed to be the crazy one. Why are people acting this way? And so this is my best explanation of what's going on in our community. I should have more on fakezappa.com or Fake Zappa PDX on social media.